All right. I'm now live. My God. Look at this. I have a record. I'm going to put on a record before we start. This is called Acre Thrills by U.S. Maple. What's up, everybody? We got my cousin Jordan in here. What's up, Jordan? We got Jack. We got Ruby in here. Just hanging, listening to a record, having a Topo Chico. Ruby usually dances. I'm not in a super dancey mood, but I'll give it a go. We're listening to Acre Thrills by U.S. Maple, a great Chicago band. Mark Shippey and company. I'm going to invite Ruby to the hang here. Oh, what's up? There you are.
Hello.
Nice.
Best album, one of my favorites.
Miss Chicago. Miss live music.
Yeah.
Throw it under the bus. Okay. I'm going to turn it off. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the 8th edition of Shred Radio. This time, I'm going to give my facilitation skills a whirl here, and I'm going to interview Ruby. Ruby's been doing such a great job interviewing everyone, and she needs to be interviewed. My God, we need to interview her, so here we are. We're going to interview Ruby. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, welcome to the 8th episode. We're taking some time in the lead up to our website launch here in early 2021. Actually, we have a launch date. Should we just go ahead and say it? It's March 13th. March 13th is going to be the launch date. So
Pisces
that's
new moon.
what it is. Pisces new moon, apparently. So yes. That'll be sick. It's good to do things in the new moon. So yeah, website launch. Yeah, so we will have a big party. We'll be making some announcements about that. March 13th is the date. Mark it down now, but we will be making noise about it very soon. But yeah, we're just chatting with each other about how we came to build Shred and what we hope it will become. So, you know, Shred really emerged from a bunch of conversations that made us feel alive, curious, and hopeful. We're super thankful to everyone who's interacted with us, and we're thankful for being here, for you being here with us tonight. Yeah, so we're super happy to be alive at the same time, here in this universe, in this cosmos with you right now. This is super cool. So today we're talking with Ruby, like I said. Ruby is Shred's creative director, and she is also our commissar of all things that have to do with tone, communication, and aesthetics. She's an absolute master at analyzing trends and various strains of discourse on social media. I cannot keep this straight. We help each other. You know, I tell Ruby things, Ruby tells me things. Her speciality is with this communication zone. So good. Ruby is an artist, an organizer, and a care worker, and she's dedicated to building a world where joy, safety, and comfort are accessible to everyone. She's Pittsburgh-raised, and she found her footing in Chicago, where she became a member of For the People's Artists Collective, and she became involved with such campaigns as Free Brescia, No Cop Academy, and the recently successful Fight to End Money Bail in Illinois. So we're super excited that campaign was just a success. Legislation just passed not too long ago to end money bail in Illinois. It is possible. So that was, yeah, amazing to see Ruby's blood, sweat, and tears, you know, making this happen. That was some serious stuff. So, yeah, I met Ruby 12 and a half years ago. It was a bright, sunny August day in Chicago's Grant Park. My God. We were both freshmen at Columbia College, and we hit it off. A long story, now we're married. I'm saying the same thing that you said last week.
Yeah.
We told the state, it was modified a little bit. We told the state, our communities, and one Unitarian pastor how much we like each other.
Shout out, Mel.
Shout out, Mel Hoover. So yeah, we've been collaborating on a pretty sick relationship. Our relationship has been a pretty dope dialectic, you might say. Moving between various lines of questioning, inquiry, agitation, and practice together. So yeah, you know, here we are. And what I want to say is I appreciate your ethics. You said you appreciate my ethics. I appreciate your ethics.
My ethics?
And also yours, yeah. And also your ability to see yourself as part of the natural world in both a very deep and also a chill way. You take relationships very seriously, and you care deeply about what other people think, feel, and have to say. It's very great to watch. Watching your great ability to juggle, synthesize, and communicate large amounts of information and all your organizing work has been amazing. It's been amazing to see. You're shredding at facilitation and comms. You're like the Alice Coltrane of comms, I might say. So yeah, so that's, you know, I love you bunch, and I'm glad that we're here.
Oh, thank you, Eli. That's so sweet. And I love you lots.
Nice. So we're going to take a second to take care of our nervous system here. We're going to meditate a little bit. Ruby's been doing this. She's training a bunch up to do the facilitation on that front. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you something that I like. This is called the Ujjayi breath. So we can just take a second. You can do this or you can not do this. Or you can, you know, do something else. Like there's a little simple thing called the butterfly hug. That does this thing where you're crossing the division line of yourself. That really helps calm the old brain down. You can do the same thing on your legs. But what I like to do is called the Ujjayi breath. And it's like as if you were blowing on a mirror to, like, you know, fog it up. But do that with your mouth closed and do it through your nose. So, you know, so we can just meditate and take some breaths like this using the Ujjayi breath, and it'll sound like this. That's what it sounds like. So you can let's just take a second and breathe a little bit. All right. So we like to meditate, but we also like to fucking party. What are you doing right now, Ruby, to make this feel like a party?
Well, I have my go-to little black dress on. It's velvet. And I'm wearing some of my favorite Dornamorphosis jewelry that I made. I'm wearing this sick jacket that it was my dad's when he was young, and he embroidered these like daisies on it. And then my mom wore it while she was pregnant with me, so it's like a family heirloom party jacket, and I wear it when I want to be like powered up and like feel loved and protected. And also I'm drinking some red wine. And I have a candle burning, which is like when I want to party with my ancestors, I just light a candle and I'm like, come hang out. We got a fire. So my ancestors are here too, partying.
That is great. Well, I just have a Topo Chico. That's what I'm doing to make this feel like a party. And also, we just listened to that U.S. Maple record, and it was really dope. So that makes me feel hyped to listen to, you know, anything that Mark Shippey does. Cool. So yeah, so let's start out. I want to start out by hearing a little bit about what 2020 was like for you. What was that like? It was a wild year.
It was a really wild year. It started wild. It continued to be wild. I don't think we knew all the ways it would be so wild. But basically, for us, 2020 started with us moving back to Pittsburgh after living in Chicago for 12 years. And the move was really emotionally difficult for a lot of reasons, and it also coincided with other emotionally difficult things. Mostly because, like, I'm so in love with Chicago and my community's there and just the city itself. We had a beautiful apartment. And in the months leading up to the move, I think we made the decision, you know, probably late summer. And I would catch myself being like, are you really going to leave Chicago? Are you really going to like leave these people, this beautiful life that you have for yourself, this city where you've become an adult? But it was time. We had been talking about it for a while. And it's actually really wild that we timed it right before 2020 hit, because it was good to make that transition and then find ourselves in a situation where we were like living with my dad. We had lower expenses. And so even though it was really emotionally difficult, I feel like there was something that aligned us with that timing. And the plan was to kind of get back to Pittsburgh and then chill for just a little bit. And I don't think we knew the meaning of chill at that point. Maybe we still don't, but like we were like, yeah, we're gonna take a minute. But really the plan was to kind of chill, get our bearings, and then kind of dive right back in. We were gonna look for orgs to join. You know, you started playing gigs right away. I was looking for, you know, places to kind of hang out. I was going to look for a full-time job. We were thinking about buying a house. We were kind of on this trajectory to be like, okay, let's take a breather and then dive back in the way that we were doing things in Chicago. And then once we actually got to Pittsburgh, I know both of us, but in my situation, I got hit with a pretty massive wave of emotions that needed to be processed. I had a ton of like fear and grief and heaviness and guilt. And I basically just had to go way inside of myself. I didn't really have another choice. Like, maybe it had something to do with finally taking a breath after working really hard for a long time, but I don't think I could have avoided that level of like, I need to go all the way inside. So I rested deeply for about a month, and that involved also kind of a lot of like drinking and crying in the bathtub. And then toward the end of February, I went to California, and I went there because the Center for Story-Based Strategy was holding a gathering of their trainers, and I had just become a trainer in their network. And so I went out to California, spent a week with some really brilliant organizers and narrative strategy folks from all over the country. Had a great time in California. My friend May showed me, we had a beautiful day in San Francisco. I got to see the ocean and some beautiful murals and like went dancing. That was the last time I went dancing. I remember like a dude hitting on me and like spitting on my face. And I was like, is this where I get COVID? Is this it? But that was the last time I got hit on at a bar. And then I came back to Pittsburgh, and then quarantine set in pretty much right after that. And so I just want to acknowledge that there is like no silver lining to a pandemic. It's enraging and really deeply cruel that so many people have suffered and have like left us this year. And I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that, like, silently. Let's just take a second to reflect on like what we've witnessed this year and who we've lost. Just gonna breathe for a sec. So I think heading in to the pandemic and recognizing that I knew the government wasn't going to do what it needed to do to care for us. And so I was kind of bracing myself for a lot of grief and turbulence. But also, I don't think that I would have taken the pause or the space to get as deep as I actually needed to get this year, had it not been for the fact that we were basically forced to sit still. You know, you and I found ourselves in a situation where we had planned to not be working at that point. We had planned to kind of take a breath. And I think the pandemic just kind of pushed us further into that pause. And the fact that I found myself in one of the houses that I actually grew up in, right as it was time for me to process my entire life up to 30, was really wild and amazing. You know, shout out to my dad for giving us a spot to kind of land. It was really interesting to be in his house. I have a lot of really dynamic memories from growing up there, some really complicated and painful, some really beautiful. And so it was just really wild to be there. And I think I did a lot of subconscious and conscious investigating and purging and healing. And I want to shout out that right before I left Chicago, when I was still working with Chicago Community Bond Fund, they very generously sent me to a training with a group called the Ine Institute in Boston. And one of Ine's pieces that they do is to talk about the seasons in our own lives, in our organization's lives, within movements. And at that training, I just got this framework for understanding that I was heading into a much overdue winter period. Like I needed to rest, to kind of experience a little bit of a small death, the death of the old me that was the go, 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 you know, really publicly vibrant, energetic person that I was in Chicago, to kind of assess, to take count of what I've had and shed some old things and decide what seeds I wanted to plant. And so I feel like the beginning of 2020 was that winter. And again, I don't think I actually would have taken a winter had the pandemic not happened. So most of early 2020 was just not a lot of output. It was a lot of being quiet, listening to my own thoughts. I did start planting a garden in the late spring. I planted the seeds myself. My dad and I tilled the dirt up. We actually made the space in the yard. And that garden kind of took me through this very seasonal process all throughout 2020. It was really beautiful to be grounded there with the dirt and the seeds. And then we started Shred. I think probably in May or June, we got really serious about it. We got a fellowship with CSS, which really kind of anchored the fact that we were like, okay, this is going to be a real thing. Like, this isn't going to be a thing we kind of talk about. This is like a project we're doing. So we had a ton of conversations about what Shred needed to be. We didn't know it was a magazine at the time, but we worked with a lot of folks. We brought in our team. We started thinking about what we were actually trying to say and how we wanted to say it. And we really just kind of got invested and started to create and explore. And during that time, I started to take a lot of inventory of everything that I'm really fascinated with in movement work, and interpersonal relationships too, and just kind of reflected really, really hard. Like I said, I didn't do a lot of output. It was a lot of staring into space, a little bit of hallucinogens here and there, some 5 a.m. kind of bathtub sessions, and just a lot of breakthroughs and connections and dots being connected. Not a lot of output. But then whenever we started Shred, I was like, okay, what do I actually want to put out? And I also during this time had, I guess, what I would call a spiritual awakening. I think because of the stillness and the depth of the emotional pain I was experiencing, I had some kind of spiritual stuff. And my mother raised me with spiritual practices. She's kind of like an earth witch. But I started listening to this podcast called Soberish by this comedian named Jessa Reed. It's really weird, but if you like listening to people talk about addiction and codependency, that's how I came to it. And she talks about aliens and ascension and galactic stuff, but it's a really great, it really helped me kind of contextualize my spirituality as well. And so this is a long part. 2020 had a lot. It held a lot. But so about in June, a family friend who's known me since I was really small, had known me for a long, long time, invited me to join her therapy practice. And basically, I've been in student mode since then, kind of learning about our nervous systems and the impacts of developmental trauma in general, and the ways that our minds and bodies are so very deeply impacted by the violent systems that we're forced to navigate every day. And also thinking about how we can actually replicate or undo that violence in our personal relationships, and all the ways that happens or doesn't happen. And I felt like I was kind of in a trance when I started learning this kind of stuff. It was almost like like I would listen to YouTube videos or do reading or whatever. And it was almost like I was remembering rather than learning new stuff. It was like, right, this makes sense, of course. So it didn't feel like I was studying and getting new information. It was kind of like I was remembering. And so that's kind of been my 2020, is just coming back to student mode, thinking really intentionally about what I want to put out into the world and not forcing that if it's not ready. And I feel like, we moved again at the end of 2020. We're now in our own house. And I feel like 2020 was basically like pull everything out of the dresser and look at it and decide what you want to keep, see if you need new stuff. And then 2021, I think, is going to be a lot of like rearranging our closet so that we can kind of pull the stuff we need to have a dope outfit for that day. Like, what do we need to be who we need to be today? And that's what I'm taking into 2021 with me.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on, and that was, I definitely remember, an intense reflective period at your dad's, and super grateful for Ed for letting us stay there, Yeah, so through all that, have you performed or done any work in person at all with others this year?
Well, like I said, the last time I was really in person was with the network gathering with Center for Story-Based Strategy in February, and that was amazing. I had some plans to do traveling and train with them this year, but those got canceled, obviously. So I did start doing trainings with CSS once we figured out how to move it online, which has been amazing. I've gotten to meet so many cool people from all over the country. I've really dug into food justice work, which is cool because I have my family on my mom's side is Black farmers, so I feel severed from them, but this food justice work has kind of like made me want to connect with that part of my life again. But mostly it was just you and me doing work in person and like really feeling like we developed our community with our Shred core team. We did have a few like socially distanced hangouts with friends, like dinner parties where we were like on the opposite end of a porch. But other than that, it's really just been you and me. It was really cool to live with my dad during quarantine. We didn't really do any work together, but he's just always working. So it was cool to be back around that energy. He's really prolific. And he's also doing a lot of mutual aid all the time, just like keeping people alive, getting people to doctor's appointments, feeding people. And then I do consider the work that I was doing in the garden as in-person work with the earth. Like the earth is a living thing and the plants are living things. That was my day job. Like that was my schedule commitment, was like every day I'm going to be in the garden. So I went there every day and I worked with the earth and the plants, and that was my in-person work.
Nice, yeah. So how did you come to doing all the things that you're doing? You have a communications background, you went to got a radio degree from Columbia College, but then you were like a big organizer, doing a lot of organizing work in Chicago. How did that all happen?
Yeah, so this is like the standard like one-on-one organizing summary, but I'll give a little bit more detail. Back to the very beginnings, like I said, my mom is kind of like an earthy person. She kind of raised me to be really connected with the earth and animals. And my dad is a really detailed artist with a huge dedication to like his craft and the detail. And he's also a huge hedonist. So I kind of grew up with these like oddball parents who really encouraged me to be artistic and just kind of to explore, to be grounded in nature. And I grew up in Pennsylvania. I was a pretty weird kid, obviously. There was a lot of conflict in my household in my early life, and I think that kind of shaped how I viewed my relationships. I kind of always felt like a caretaker. Like if I saw a kid by themselves or getting bullied, I would usually try to be like, do you want to come sit with us? Like, let's just be weird together. Like, you're cool. So I really loved my close friend group. I still love them a lot. Spent a lot of time in the woods by myself, like playing weird pretend games, probably like way longer than a lot of kids did because I lived in the woods and I didn't have like neighbors to chill with. So I was always like pretending I was some, wild character. And then also I did play with a lot of people in my dad's neighborhood once we got settled there. I had a sick trampoline. That was cool. But really, I grew up debating my dad a lot. Like by the time I was 12 or 13, we started debating quite a bit. And so my dad was a bad kid, a lot of rage. He had a really healthy hatred of the cops and jails. He, had kind of been in shitty contact with the state for a long time growing up, because he was being bad, but also because he didn't have, the care he needed to to, you know, feel cared for. And so he kind of, you know, was just like, yeah, fuck the cops, but he was a libertarian. And I could not reconcile the idea that poverty was avoidable in the system. Like, I would look at how things were and be like, how are you telling me that we're on an even playing field? Like, what are you talking about? And I just couldn't reconcile it. And so we would debate a lot, and he would encourage me to read stuff and kind of question dominant narratives. But also it was me, a 12 or 13-year-old, debating a dude who listened to Rush Limbaugh all day. So like, he had talking points, and I was like, well, I don't know. I'm in ninth grade. Seems like your shit doesn't make sense, dude. And we would debate about it a lot. And this was like a really emotional thing for me, but it was also really good. Like, it was good. I learned to like listen to what somebody's saying and try to meet their points in a lot of interesting ways. And long story short, I won with the help of his rad friends. He is now a huge commie and loves Bernie. He's probably more of an anarchist, but, you know, definitely not a libertarian anymore. And so I ended up doing a radio program in high school, and I didn't know what I wanted to do for a living. Like, I had pretty good grades, but I had no concept. I was like, maybe journalism, I don't know. But somebody said, hey, you're really good at radio. Why don't you just do that? And I was like, cool. So I went and looked at Columbia College. They had a radio program, and that was cool, but mostly I'm just really happy I ended up in Chicago. Really, really thankful that I ended up there at 18 and was able to kind of come into adulthood there. Graduated from radio school, did not want to go into that industry, had done a few internships, and it was just like, I don't care. It was not cool. And so I got into the service industry. I was a barista for a while. And then I think in 2013, our very good friend, and actually the person who lived upstairs from us and got us the apartment that we loved so much, our friend Carissa, she was killed in a hit and run accident. And that moment really kind of changed the whole direction of my life. Like, I had always been like, the world's messed up. And we took some really great classes in college. And I was like, yes, I would like to do something about this, but I didn't know what or how. And Carissa was like a really, really vibrant, beautiful person, and in her own way, kind of a community organizer. Like, she brought together such wild, diverse parts of our community. And when she died, we all came together to do a memorial for her and to raise money for her family. And that was kind of that first taste of like, oh, I can actually help to bring a community together and get something done. And so after that, I left the service industry. I worked at Little Goat for like 2 months, couldn't do it, and then was like, okay, I have to just do something else. So I was like, I'm going to do art, and I'm going to figure out how to be politically active. Started teaching glassblowing lessons, which was really fun. But right off the bat, I got connected to my friend Christina Tendelia, who at the time was working with Southsiders Organized for Unity and Liberation. And got right into the fight to end money bond right there in 2013, 2014. That was a campaign they were already working on. And I was like, at the time, I was like, I think if women get free, we're going to be a lot better off. And I recognized that the incarceration system was really targeting women, and that when a mother is incarcerated, a whole family is incarcerated. And so I was like, well, this is probably a campaign that'll help me get there towards like fighting for women's liberation. I learned so much with that group on that campaign. And also about a year and a half, 2 years in, I had a little bit of a crisis around Alinsky style organizing. And there's a lot of different stuff to take and leave from that method. And I don't want to boil it down to anything, but I just had a lot of issues around like the power before program kind of concept of like, we just get people in a room and then tell them what to do. And I felt like there was a little bit of like emotional manipulation and dishonesty that the one-on-one to figure out somebody's personal interests so you can keep them engaged felt really icky for me. Just a kind of a lack of transparency. And I was like, if I don't feel like I can necessarily trust people who I'm building with here, not that I don't love them and value them, think they're doing their best, but it's not a deep trust here. It feels extractive. And so I couldn't invite other people into it. So I had a little bit of like okay, I gotta figure out something else to do. And luckily, I was caught by two incredible people, Kelly Hayes with Lifted Voices and Monica Trinidad with Four People Artist Collective. So in 2015, both of those groups came together. With Lifted Voices, we did a lot of direct action and training around direct action, which was really, really awesome and intense. And of course, with FTP, we're an artist collective. So we were talking about the importance of cultural work in organizing, in our political work, making rapid response artwork. And really, I launched into a period of a lot of like really deep in-person joy and struggle, and a lot of like calculated risk, back to back to back, a lot of direct action, a lot of like confrontation with the state, with cops, getting folks to take risks, making sure that folks were cared for, learned a lot about how to properly do that, and also made some mistakes there. And so with FTP, we got into the Buy Anita campaign to unseat State's Attorney Anita Alvarez. We shut down the International Police Conference in 2015, you know, folks in lockboxes. We did a Stop ITOA action where, you know, ITOA is like a conference where the military sells death machines to the local police to hurt us with. We shut down traffic. You and I actually, with Lifted Voices, shut down traffic to demand freedom for Naomi Freeman, who was incarcerated in Cook County Jail while she was pregnant. She defended herself against an abusive partner and ended up in jail. And so we shut down the street, I think, with probably like 16 other people. Oh yeah, because it was 16 folks for 16 shots in a cover-up. We were just kind of going really hard around like, fuck Rahm Emanuel, fuck the police state. You know, so that was the first time you and I were arrested together. We shut down Lakeshore Drive for Rekia Boyd. Rekia Boyd was a huge part of that period of organizing for me and others. I learned so much. And just in general, we were trying to draw a lot of attention to how murderous Rahm Emanuel was and how the CPD steals our resources to kill us. So that was a period of like never sitting still, a lot of stress, and a lot of learning. And it was really a crash course in abolition and in imagination, and what it takes to kind of imagine really a world in real time without police and prisons and without carceral solutions to problems. A lot of learning about what it means to be in revolutionary community with people, the challenges and joys that come with that. I really do love FTP with all my heart. I'm still a member. I can see Monica's on our call right now. There have been people who have come in and out of that collective who are always going to be my dear comrades. And I've just learned so much there. It's been humbling. It's been joyful. I've learned a lot about solidarity via art and the challenges of rapid response and the limitations of like art as political action and why it's like that's part of it, but it can't be the whole thing. Another thing we did with FTP, which was a huge undertaking, is we organized an exhibition called Do Not Resist, and it actually closed just about 3 years to the day. We closed that exhibition. And it was really a huge undertaking, and it was really rewarding. And also I had a big emotional dip after it closed. Like closing night, I got a little too drunk. I came home. I know you received me when I got home, and I was like weeping and sobbing and being like, this is not enough. Like that was so much work and it's nothing like that. It didn't feel like it was nothing, but in that moment, in my despair, I was like, this is not enough. Like I can't believe what we're up against. And there is so much value in the art, and also it's not the whole thing, and we can't pretend that we're going to like art exhibit our way out of this death machine. And I just had a really big emotional time trying to deal with that. I thank you for holding me through that, Eli. You were really comforting in that moment. So FTP has really held me through a lot. I've grown a lot, and I just want to shout out Monica again for being our founder and sticking with us and giving us love to keep us going. So yeah, really intense period of time. During this time, I worked with the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. Classic slip. Everybody calls them the International Workers of the World. It's Industrial Workers of the World. One of the oldest labor unions in the country. I ran their bookstore for 3 years, and it was really the perfect job because you work for anarchists and they're like not going to boss you around typically, or I guess they tried sometimes, but like I basically made my own schedule. I was named Employee of the Month after we got arrested. They like printed out the little picture of us laying in our lockboxes, and my boss Randy was like, "Yay, Employee of the Month!" So it was a really amazing, flexible job that allowed me to like make my own hours and allowed me to dedicate a lot of energy to doing like unpaid work. I also started making jewelry out of scrap copper, which I still make during that time, which has been a really meditative practice for me, and it's really fun. And it's also helped me to kind of make money and be able to do fundraising when I don't have any money. So we actually do fundraising for Shred with my jewelry. If you give us $10 a month via Patreon, you will get a custom Adornomorphosis piece. It's kind of like the wallet I have open for like if I need to raise money quickly, that's one way I can do it. It's just like make a bunch of jewelry and like hope it sells, and usually it does. So after that period, I at some point was like, okay, I have to stop working at this anarchist bookstore. I have to do something else. And I actually landed my dream job after this several years of working to end money bond as a coalition coordinator with the Coalition to End Money Bond. Huge shout out to Charlene and Matt and Lavette and Devereaux and Kisa and Malik and everybody with Chicago Community Bond Fund and that whole community. I was really, really blessed to be able to spend my last bit of time in Chicago working with you all. Worked there for a little over a year with community organizers, lawyers, faith leaders, advocates, and most importantly, people who had actually experienced pretrial incarceration. And we were all working in tandem to end money bond in Illinois. And what's really amazing about the Bond Fund is that they do this work very strictly through an abolitionist lens. So it's not reform, even though it does get lumped in with pretrial reform efforts. And some of our policy will be considered reform because like that's how the system will label what's happening. But the bill that was just successfully passed, which, you know, I did some work on getting the state network together and keeping the coalition together, but really it was Malik, Sharon, Sol, People's Lobby, Senator Peters. These people took it over the line this year. So many people involved in this project. And it not only prohibits the use of money bond, but it actually makes it way, way harder to lock anyone up pre-trial. And we're going to have to defend this because it doesn't actually go into effect until 2023. But when that happens, it's going to be like almost impossible to lock somebody up for a drug charge pre-trial. You're going to have evidence that somebody is dangerous to a specific person in order for them to be even considered for pretrial incarceration. So when we're looking at abolitionist versus reform, it's like, is the system changing and adapting, or are we taking its power away? And this bill, and the way that the bond fund works, takes the system's power away to put us in cages. So it was amazing to be surrounded by and accountable to abolitionists working in tandem in all these beautiful ways. Of course, it was also complicated, and that's where the accountability piece comes in of like, who are we accountable to? What are we going to have to do to actually get the policy and the systems to change versus how are we building and deepening our commitment to communities and real people? And again, that's why it's so important to have folks who have actually been impacted deeply influencing how you do that work. And that's how I met CSS. Center for Story-Based Strategy came to do a training with our coalition. I went to their advanced training in 2019, met so many beautiful people that run and are around that organization, and now I'm part of the training network. So that's the work I do now. You know, the healthcare, the mental health work is one piece, and then I do a lot of narrative strategy work.
Nice. Yeah. So busy in Chicago. My gosh. All kinds of stuff, you know. You know, and, you know, the only thing I have to say to that is I think that, you know, Randy would be upset if he heard you call him your boss. He would be like, I'm not your boss, you're my boss.
Oh, that's right. That's right. He's my fellow worker.
Yeah, he's your fellow worker.
Excellent CTU
Randy
teacher.
Yeah, CTU teacher and a rippin' tabla player. So good.
Yes, yeah. And it has a new baby. Yeah. Congrats to Teresa and Randy on the little baby.
Hooray. Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. So yeah, so you know, you've been in the trenches, so to speak, in the street doing the thing, and you know, in the halls of power, you know, trying to do the thing. So doing a little inside, little outside game there. But yeah, one thing that you did this year, a lot of what you did this year was work on this project. You know, so being somebody who's been in the streets, who's doing it on that kind of level. Why do you think this is important? Why did you spend the time doing this that you have spent doing it?
Yeah, good question. First of all, this year has shown me new levels of how time isn't like what we think it is. So I'm kind of trying to hop off the linear timeline of like the work I did and what it means. But yes, we did put a lot of work in this year, and Shred has been a labor of love, and it's also been it pours back into us, I feel like. But basically, I just had my mind blown so many times, so consistently while in Chicago. And then even more once we moved and I had some time to process and reflect. And, you know, I'm a really big talker. Like I live for deep conversation and I learn in conversation way more than I learn from books or articles. Of course, I read stuff, but I really like feel what I read and what I've read and what other people have read and just like how other people are in conversation. So I guess I feel like on one hand, I lost a lot of my community that I would just have those conversations with randomly. And I was like, I want that back. But also I'm really interested in how our species evolved. I've been really interested in that for a long time. And I want to know what parts of us are still functioning like we're hunter-gatherers while we're out here living in the realities of the 21st century. Like our bodies, our systems, the way our brain works, our emotions evolved over such a long period of time. And then what we know as society is not that old. So like this has been a blink of an eye, and yet we're like functioning within this system as if it's always existed. And I want to know what our animal selves are making of all of this, like how that factors into our organizing, even like when it comes down to like what it means to be in conflict or agreement with each other. What does that feel like? How do we build power? How do we find safety or define safety? What is autonomy? What is community? What is freedom? I think that our animal selves and our ancient selves have a lot to say about that, and I always want to factor that into our organizing conversations. So I think Shred is one way for me to feel like I have a lot of space to do that. I also really love to talk shit, but not because I want to dominate people or be right. I think I'm compelled to. I think a lot of people are really compelled to dominate each other because we live in a system that shows us nothing but domination. But I don't want to dominate people, but I'm just really fascinated by why people do what they do. And sometimes that comes out as judgment or shit talk, how beliefs are formed and what actually influences what we think is possible or correct. So I want that stuff that comes out when we criticize people in conversations with friends who we mostly agree with. I want that stuff to have a space to be respected and investigated and treated as really rich material. I think that like it was really thrilling to be wrapped up in like the day-to-day nitty-gritty of like, for example, the Cook County government power dynamics. Like sometimes it just sounds like a bunch of nerding out, but I'm like, what did that alderman say? And who do they owe? And I'm so fascinated by that. And I don't want it to just be like talking shit about somebody who took a deal with somebody else to get something done. Like why? Why did they think that was a good decision? If that was somebody we previously agreed with and now we're like, how could they possibly do that? Like, I think there's fertile, rich material there. And so I want to dig into that stuff with Shred. Also, being an abolitionist and trying to be an abolitionist in practice and having these conversations with people that don't agree with me, I know that we'd be safer without prisons or police. But I also know that people are really influenced by fear and the ruling class ideology that tells us that other poor people are who we should be afraid of, that other poor people are the biggest threat to us, rather than like war, like nuclear war or environmental collapse or this economic system we have that threatens us with starvation, this economic system that could end homelessness and instead maintains it to threaten the rest of us. That's the biggest threat to us. And so when people think about, we say like, get rid of police and prisons, and folks are like, oh my God, what are you talking about? That's so scary. I'm like, what else is scary to you? Can we talk about the fact that we're living on, we have no choice, that we live in a world where we're constantly under the threat of war and starvation every day? That's wild. And that has nothing to do with other poor people, and the police and the military are doing nothing to stop that. In fact, they're exacerbating it. So you can't really have a conversation about prisons and police without talking about housing or food or healthcare or education. And so with Shred, I want to emphasize that we need to be having full conversations and more complete pictures of what's going on in our lives, and that we can't reify, which is the word that we will continue to use and define, but we can't reify mass incarceration in the police state down to just white supremacy or down to just economics. There's a whole historic trajectory that has led us to where we are, that has led so many people to believe that the only option for safety is to have a cage or somebody with a gun. And there's also a massive history of the time before police and before cages. We've done this before. So really interested in expanding conversations, de-siloizing issues, and making sure that when we talk about one specific issue, it's easy to pull all the other necessary pieces together and form a more full look at what we're looking at. So really, it's all about uncovering underlying assumptions that shape our emotional response to the ideas that we have about society and culture, and how our emotions inform what we think we know, what feels like knowledge and knowing to us, and where emotions come in with that, where ideology comes in with that, what underlying assumptions are we going off of that are assumed truths that are actually maybe not that true. And so I've taken this approach, especially this year, of thinking like I'm a lifelong student. The safest bet is to assume I don't know most things. I basically know almost nothing. And I approach every single interaction with what can I learn from this, even if it's a fight or a disagreement. And sometimes that hurts too much to do. Like, I have family members who have voted for Trump. I have family members who have been racist towards me, racist towards each other, racist towards themselves. And I think that, some of those people treat me like I'm not worth being taken seriously. And so that really hurts. Like, they try to dominate me. They try to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. They don't value what I have to say, even though I've been like doing this work for most of my adult life. And so I allow myself to feel rage and sadness around that. But I think we can be with each other. We can be playful and disciplined when approaching disagreements. And I think we can move to be more invitational as people inevitably face more and more crises that are going to demand they change their worldview in the coming years as capitalism continues to eat itself. So for me, Shred is really a way of continuing to learn in community and to experiment with like the process of learning and building and that remembering piece. We don't have to start from scratch. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of connecting the dots and remembering what our bodies and our systems and our brains know, what our animal selves know. And I think it's also a way for me to get you to write down all of your brilliant work so that I can use it more easily, because, I've been in conversation with you for 10 years about this stuff, and there's always breakthroughs and connections. And I'm like, oh, right, of course, that piece and that piece. And I want you to like write it down. I want pictures of it so that I can use it more freely, so we can keep in this useful feedback loop that we have.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, and I appreciate the compliment. But I think that's the big thing is, you and I get in a conversation, we get in a conversation with other people, have these big picture kind of breakthrough, like, mind blowing kind of moments, like, oh damn, I read this book and it's like, this is totally applicable. Like, we should absolutely be like thinking about this in our organizing and like actually trying to implement it. And then it's like, you have this great conversation, and at the end of it, it's like, okay, so how are we going to do that? Like, how is it, like, how, like, if I, and you just think about bringing the thing that you just talked about up in like a meeting or like in a, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's totally unusable. It's in a totally unusable form. You know what I mean? Even though there's people out here who've given such a great effort to communicate the ideas in whatever ways, to just get them down and get them like, researched and documented. So yeah, no, definitely excited to give some of these ideas some oomph, give them some practical power here, so we can integrate them in some organizing. So that dovetails, with, what kind of philosophies, political ideas, cultural ideas are you interested in exploring, and that you see as being most important to integrate into these organizing spaces?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question, because like I said, I feel like every day requires different stuff, and I want my work to feel like an outfit I'm putting on. Like, I have these tools for this work I'm doing today, or this person I need to be today. So there's really nothing central. It's just a kind of a mix of everything. But I think something that's been core to what shaped how I've approached my work is the fact that I'm mixed. So I have Black family, white family, a lot of different European heritage, and mostly my family is either they came here as enslaved people or they came here as immigrants and then basically were enslaved by capitalism. They worked in coal mines and steel mills, service industry jobs. Both sides of my family have been really heavily chewed up by the economic system that we have here. And of course, racism played a huge role in that and how each side experienced the system. So I kind of live with a constant identity crisis, or I used to call it an identity crisis. Now I say I live in a liminal identity. So it's an identity that's always in process. And I would say that all identities are always in process. So that's been a huge thing for me. Coming from growing up, I was like, I don't know, I know I'm Black because I can literally see my grandfather, but I can also tell that I am not treated in the same way that people with darker skin, even people in my own family, are treated. For example, my dad was on house arrest when I was born. He definitely would have been in prison while I was growing up. I may not have even been born if he were Black. I have Black family members who have died in prison. So like, I live in this very interesting crack between like what might be considered two experiences, but they're actually like the same experience mixed all together. And what's common between them is what's impacting us. It's capitalism, it's the state, it's oppression, it's imperialism, it's patriarchy. Those things actually shape my identity way more than like my DNA. So it's uncomfortable. And I kind of have learned to love that discomfort, but it's a really rich place for exploration of what it means to be, like what it means to exist, and to have an identity and to feel that identity change based on what context I'm in, how I present, and how others perceive me. So that's a big thing that I'm trying to bring to Shred, is just this idea. I can't boil myself down to a binary idea of Black or white. The police probably can, but they also can decide they aren't going to do that. And I can't spend all my time giving disclaimers or like questioning if I'm allowed to act and being like, well, I guess I just should be quiet because I don't know who I am or who I'm speaking with or for. No, I have to act. I have to get free. I have to get my people free. So I've had to move with this uncertainty. And I really love talking to other people who have also had to move with this uncertainty. And it turns out like most people have some level of uncertainty around their identity in one way or another. So looking at ourselves and our political formations, our organizations, our publications, our ideologies as processes rather than static objects that are and will always be one thing. There's a process going on that I am becoming me every moment that's impacted by what's inside and what's outside of me. Same thing with our ideologies, same thing with our publications, same thing with our organizations. That's the core piece that I really want to dig into. But yeah, bottom line, I want all of us to get free, every single person. I don't believe we can subvert the pyramid in any way. I think that we are much better off considering tumbling the pyramid. But especially I want those
rather than inverting it, right?
Exactly, yes, turning it upside down. Somebody else being supreme rather than the dicks who have decided that they're supreme when actually they're not. They're just very scared and have a lot of power and a lot of violence to enact on us. So I want those who are most oppressed to be free. That's where I'm focused. But I'm always learning new ways to better serve this goal. And I imagine that like I'm going to get schooled a lot in the coming years. I'm constantly being schooled, having shit that I thought was solid to get knocked over with like one sentence. I hope I keep getting schooled. I'm trying to like better regulate my nervous system so that somebody tells me I'm wrong. I can be like, okay, I can receive that. And I can stay present to hear you tell me that. And I also don't have to believe you right off the bat. I don't have to say like, decide that I need to like grovel for forgiveness for having a different opinion than you, but I can hear that different opinion and actually learn and be in process with it. I know that I'm not even close to doing anything perfectly, like no one is, but especially somebody like me who I have a lot of privilege. I have light skin. I have relatively solid financial situation going. I mean, as solid as any person with the amount of student debt I have can be. I'm able-bodied. I have a lot of privilege, but I'm also trying my best to advance, how I can show up best for these processes and to make sure that folks who are the most marginalized become liberated or are prioritized in our liberation efforts. And I want to get as many people as we can aligned in conversation toward how do we take care of each other? How do we care for one another? Because at my core, I am fucking pissed. I am full of rage that we can't just take care of each other, and that instead of having time to take care of each other, we have to see our resources be hoarded or literally be used to kill us and other people all over the world, other poor people. And I hate it. I hate it so much. And I think most people can relate with that level of rage. If you get down to it, you can say, like, bottom line, all of our money and resources are being used for death, and I would like them to be used for life. That's a pretty easy thing to align around. And from there, I think disagreements can be very fertile ground. So I want Shred to be a focal point for this effort of winning back care, our ability to care for each other, which has been, again, from my understanding, a much more central part of how we operated pre-colonialism. Patriarchy has a lot to do with this, right? But if you can imagine briefly for a moment a world where the needs of a birthing person, a person bringing a human life into the world, and a parent and a small child are at the center of how we function, and also the care and respect of our elders. So those bodies that might be the most fragile and in need of the most care are also considered the most precious. That's what I want to get back to. And I don't, capitalism absolutely will not allow that, because those bodies are not productive and they do not generate profit. So for me, it's really fucking simple. And so I want to get back to that. I think it's something we can remember. It's something that we're crying out for. And I think there's a lot of ideology that gets in the way of us making sense of that. But to me, it's a pretty easy central goal to organize around. So demanding that care be centered and resourced. And when we get into that, it's pretty clear that science, culture, and politics we'll all have to work in tandem to turn the ship around, basically. Like there's a trajectory of our cultural beliefs, there's a trajectory of our scientific efforts, there's a trajectory of our politics, at least here in the United States with the two-party system. It's all geared towards profit, extraction, war. We need a collaboration and a coordination, and in fact to understand that science, culture, and politics are all interconnected to the point where they're basically the same thing. We need to direct all of those things away from profit and towards supporting life and safety and health. We need our culture to be resilient and supportive of our actual emotions. And we need to be able to grieve together and to celebrate together so that we can resonate and find what actually works and feels like care and feels like trust and safety. So yeah, that's a big part of, I think, what I want to see with Shred. I'm also just very into like sexy stuff and partying and like feeling good and joy. Not as an afterthought, not as like, okay, we had the meeting and now we party. It's not a decoration. It's not something that should be used to sell a brand underneath of it. We need to be partying right now together for the movement, within the movement. We need to be partying, celebrating each other, loving each other, laughing, dancing, eating, celebrating. Those things are really important to me. So I take it upon myself to try to bring that vibe into everything that Shred does when I can. I just want people to feel like if we're on the freedom side, we're cool, we're sexy, we're attractive, and people should want to join us and be with us because the world's going to be so much more fun when we win. So.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's a lot there. And, you know, to unpack, you know, just real quick, you dropped the R bomb, the reification bomb earlier, you know, talking about that identity piece and, you know, all of this stuff where we have things that happen at the level of appearance, you know, you have racism in the world, or you have patriarchy, you have whatever, but like you were saying earlier, you know, there's historical roots to this, you know, there's processes that made these happen, and there's ongoing processes that reproduce them. So yeah, definitely what we want to do here is be unpacking that together. So that's awesome. Yeah, we don't want to stay at the level of appearance using the, you know, master's tools, quote unquote, you know, from Audre Lorde. We don't want to be using the master's tools to try to dismantle the master's house. You know, we have to use some radical stuff, you know, and for us that means, you know, seeing things as interconnected processes. In other words, seeing things as, you know, from a dialectical perspective. So that's awesome. So what are you most looking forward to, like, creating, like, in the actual sort of content where the rubber hits the road here?
Yeah, it's hard because, like, we are called a magazine, but most of what I'm excited about is actually the stuff that we will be doing, like, live, where we get to be in conversation together. So events, stuff with social media interaction, podcasts, finally using my radio degree. When I graduated, I was like, I don't know if I'll ever use this. But now I'm like, oh, I just had to like figure out what was worth talking about. So I have so many podcast ideas, just being in conversation with people. I'm actually dreaming up a podcast called Beast to Beast, which the name came to me in a dream. So I'm very excited to be able to use it in real life. Basically, I'm going to talk to folks who do person-to-person work stuff. Doesn't have to be defined as labor. Social workers, healthcare workers, doulas, educators, faith leaders, people who work in sex education, sex workers, social workers, parents, caretakers, and even people who fight, people in sports. We'll actually be starting off with a series centered around boxing and digging into everything that boxing can kind of provide a framework for, as far as what it's like to be in person, gender stuff, combat stuff, non-spoken consent, all that kind of stuff. Taking a look at what it's actually like to be human with a human, humans with humans together, with care and play and conflict happening. And again, I'm looking at this as an abolitionist project. People often say that cops keep us safe, but when you look at what cops actually do, they tend to show up after harm has occurred, and then they make shit worse. They throw people who are being abused in jail. They take stability away from entire communities with incarceration. They take people who use drugs and criminalize them when what they really need is care. So cops don't keep us safe. They show up after the fact, and then they take all of our money from people who are actually preventing harm, from people who are intervening directly and helping with recovery and repair, people that, prevent harm by building strong communities. These folks have nothing to do with the police and are, in fact, under threat of the police, and they should have the resources that the cops have to do their work. My Aunt Sue works in a ward where people who are having mental health issues come. She doesn't make nearly enough money. She has to train cops to respond to mental health crisis, and they don't respect her. I want her to be making $100,000 a year so that she can feed all her neighbors like she does and go to work well rested, and do the crucial work that she does to actually address harm. But instead, she's not paid enough. Most people that I know that do the kind of work that actually intervenes in and repairs harm are not paid enough, and cops are out here making six figures. So I want to talk about what the people who do the work with the people are doing, how it feels for them, and how it could be better for them. So I'm super excited about that. Basically uplifting the people that make sure we can be with each other in peace and growth and rest. That's how I want to be with people. So I'm also really excited about comics and art we have coming up. We're going to have a whole series called Reflections on Organizing, where we kind of take people who do coordination work, organizing work, and take lessons they've learned and make it into kind of a comic. Shout out to Sunny, who's been one of our core illustrators on that. And also anything funny. I really love to laugh. I love memes. I like to be a little snarky. So funny stuff. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot here, and there's a lot of great stuff to look forward to. So closing out, last question: what are you doing to take care of yourself this winter, and reproduce yourself to be able to do all this great stuff?
Yeah. Well, eating food that you make for me, which is always a joy. Gotta shout out Eli every time anybody mentions anything about care, because if it weren't for you, I would eat takeout and like mac and cheese all the time. So thank you for making sure I eat a vegetable sometimes. You're great. I've been sleeping a lot, allowing myself to stay up late because my creative brain really kicks in late at night, but sleeping a lot, taking naps. I find that the mental health care work I do is really, really fulfilling, but also it's a lot to hold space energetically for somebody. So I try to factor in naps and not overschedule myself. I'm trying to take too much work on, like more work than I can handle. I need a lot of space. And I'm very lucky to have it right now. There might be a time in the future where I'm more scheduled, but right now I'm enjoying a lighter schedule. I'm kind of rewiring my approach to work, taking a different look at my procrastination. It's something I felt a lot of shame about in the past, but I'm just thinking of different ways to look at it. Like, am I really avoiding the work if I always get it done? Maybe I could just stop worrying about it and do it when I do it and work close to deadline. That's fine. working on that, seeing how I can sit with that. Learning how to play the drums. We got that sick cymbal that we talked about. I played a little drums before this. I've always wanted to play the drums. Just singing, dancing. I pray. I have like an altar that I pray at. I learned to read tarot this year, so I pull cards. Snuggling with my kitties. And just, yeah, eating good food, resting. That's it.
Nice. That is great. All right. Well, we've been talking with Ruby Pinto here. You know, we're going to have this live stream up on our Instagram, and we're going to post all of these also on our other channels on YouTube. You know, and we're going to be distributing these along with our other great podcasts to, you know, you'll eventually hear, once the launch comes around on March 13th, the full launch, you'll be able to find all this great content wherever you get your podcasts. So that would be awesome.
Yeah, and next week I'm chatting with Ari Atkins from Chicago. Cannot wait to be in conversation with Ari. Just with our check-in, it was like, wow, there's so much here. So tune in next Saturday. Me and Ari are going to be here, same time, same place.
Yeah, we're going to get our bigger stream set up together, so we will be streaming that on YouTube, on Instagram Live, on Facebook, and on our Twitch page. We don't have any Twitch friends right now. Please go and follow us on Twitch.
Find another platform. Find space for another platform in your regimen.
Go to Twitch and get addicted to that.
Yeah, we're going to be playing games with people. If folks want to play some online games and just kind of hang out, we're looking for ways to like be with you in real time. So Twitch is going to allow that.
Oh yeah, we will be playing some video games online, some pretty sick board games and RPGs. We're trying to find political RPGs to play, and like
that aren't awful.
And maybe even that aren't awful. Yeah, where we can be like the commies and, you know, do the fun thing with that. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, look for all that in the future. Shred-mag.com is our splash page right now, our pre-launch page. You know, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram. Obviously, you're here on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to throw us a little love, go to patreon.com/shredmagazine. We have some really great gifts up there. Like you said, if you like Ruby's copper jewelry, we have some shred-themed copper/metal jewelry. That
it's actually like recycled, like duct work, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that one is. Yeah, that is those have been. Yeah, or the recycled duct work. It works with the space theme. It's very dope. Trust us. You know, so yeah, you'll get one of those if you join at $10. I think $20 is you'll get that and all the other gifts plus a little Gilded Records care package. So if you have a tape player and you want some fucking sick noise tapes, then you can go you can do that, or you can just buy it straight from Gilded Records. But you want to sign up with the Patreon, and it'll be so great, and support this. So that's it, and we love you all greatly. You know, if you haven't heard from us, if you've filled out the feedback form and you haven't heard from us, please be patient. There's a lot that we're trying to do, but we love you, and we want to definitely collaborate with everybody and talk with everybody. If it's super urgent, if you're like, I really got this thing I'm thinking about, just hit us up again. And that's it. We love you.
We love you.